I was gone for one weekend. That's all it took. When I got back to my secluded mountain cabin, there was barbed wire across my driveway, wrapped around MY property like I was some kind of criminal. No warning, no notice, just steel signs and smug little flags from an HOA I'd never even agreed to join. I'm a man who usually handles things quietly, but they didn't realize who I was. They had no idea they just declared war on the sitting state mayor. The drive up the mountain had always been my therapy. Just trees, sky, and the kind of silence you can't buy in the city. No press briefings. No reporters waiting outside my car door. No handshakes or photo ops. Just gravel crunching under my tires, wind slipping through pine needles, and the quiet of my tires rolling toward the only place that ever truly felt like mine. The cabin sat near the ridge line, modest, hand-built, tucked beneath a canopy of Douglas fir and maple. I'd come up alone this time. No staff, no escort, no distractions. I was tired of committee meetings, ethics scandals, and the whispers that came with power. This cabin? It was my place to shut the world out. So when I rounded that final curve and caught a glimpse of the entryway, I hit the brakes hard. Barbed wire, rusted, coiled, and taut, stretched across my driveway like a war zone perimeter. Thick metal stakes had been hammered deep into the soil, one of them leaning slightly, like it had been installed in a rush. My gate, the simple wooden one I'd built with my own two hands, had a shiny new padlock dangling from it. A lock I didn't recognize. A lock I hadn't put there. I blinked, thinking maybe I was looking at the wrong entrance. Maybe this wasn't my land. But no, there was a painted mailbox with a worn red flag I'd never replaced. There was the tree I carved my initials into 5 years ago. This was my land, my home. I stepped out of my SUV slowly, heart rate climbing, confusion quickly giving way to something colder. A sharp wind passed through, catching on a rough wooden sign nailed into a nearby tree. Private HOA zone, trespassers would be fined. It looked like it had been scribbled by someone in a hurry. White paint, crooked letters, and no official seal or logo. Just a warning, bold and smug. The kind of sign you put up not to protect anything, but to claim something. I walked up to the gate, knelt by the lock. New, stainless steel. The keyhole was clean, fresh install. And then I saw the paper. Taped directly to my front door, flapping gently in the wind, was a printed letter. Just one sheet. No envelope. No return address. No signature. It read, "You are currently in violation of Article 12B of the Alpine Preservation Committee Code. Unauthorized structures must be cleared within 14 days to avoid forfeiture." That was it. No contact info. No official documents. No reference to county codes or local enforcement. Just a warning. A threat, really. I stared at it for a long moment, the paper fluttering like a challenge. And that's when I heard the engine. Not mine. Smaller. Higher pitched. Probably a Subaru. I turned just in time to see a white crossover pulling up beside the fence line. Dust kicked up behind it. The car came to a slow, calculated stop, like whoever was driving knew exactly how dramatic they wanted the entrance to be. Out stepped a woman in her mid-40s, blonde bob cut, hiking boots too clean to have seen dirt. She wore khaki pants and a teal jacket embroidered with the words, "Alpine Preservation Committee, President." It looked like something you'd order online and wear to feel important. She shut her door with too much flair and smiled at me like she'd just caught a teenager sneaking out after curfew. "Sir," she said, dragging out the word with a tone that sounded halfway between pity and superiority. "Did you not see the sign?" "I saw it," I said. "Now, maybe you can explain what the hell it's doing on my property." She didn't blink, just reached into her jacket and pulled out a folded clipboard, the kind with too many unnecessary papers clipped to it for effect. "You're currently in violation of Section 12B, Line 3, non-compliant structures on protected woodland. This structure," she waved her pen vaguely toward my cabin, "is unregistered and has not been approved by the Alpine Preservation Committee for occupancy." I stared at her. "Lady, I built this place 10 years ago. I own every inch of this land, and there's no such thing as an Alpine Preservation Committee anywhere in my title records." She smiled wider. That awful kind of smile that says, I know something you don't. We've recently redrawn boundaries. This land now falls within our oversight. We're working closely with local officials to bring all residents up to code. I took a step closer. And who exactly gave you that authority? Sir, she said again, with even more condescension, we're not asking for conflict. We're simply trying to preserve the integrity of this region. You can't just throw up random structures in the middle of a conservation buffer. This isn't a random structure. It's my home. And this isn't a conservation buffer. It's private forested land, deeded and cleared at the state level. Well, she chirped, if you have issues with our notice, you're welcome to file a grievance form through our website. In the meantime, please respect the posted boundaries. That was the moment something shifted. She didn't know. She had no idea who I was. No clue that the man standing in muddy boots with a weekend duffel bag slung over one shoulder wasn't just some out-of-town weekend hiker. She didn't realize that I wasn't going to hop online and beg for permission to access my own land. She didn't recognize the name Robert Hale, the name that had been printed on every ballot in this state for the last 6 years. And I wasn't going to tell her. Not yet. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. You're trespassing, I said. She tilted her head, amused. No, you are. But that's okay. We'll give you some time to vacate before we start issuing citations. Then she turned her back to me, climbed into her Subaru, and drove off, leaving a trail of dust and arrogance behind her. I stood there for a long time after she left, just watching the dust settle over the barbed wire she'd had installed. Then I took out my phone. I wasn't going to make threats. I wasn't going to shout, but I was going to make a list. And when it was done, someone was going to lose a lot more than just their clipboard. I gave her a chance. That's the part one keep coming back to. I didn't storm into her fake little HOA office or call on my attorney general the second I saw that barbed wire. I didn't use my title like a battering ram. No, I offered to sit down like adults. I brought copies of my deed, original zoning maps, and even the county's digital land boundary overlay. I printed them out myself, marked every coordinate with care. Thought maybe, just maybe, there'd been some kind of mistake. Vivian didn't even look at them. She showed up that Saturday morning wearing that same smug jacket, a new clipboard in her hand, and an iced coffee like she was headed to brunch. I brought the property documents. I told her, holding them out. She smiled like I'd handed her a child's crayon drawing. Mr. Hale, she said, dripping with forced politeness, the time for paperwork has passed. This area has already been marked under Alpine Preservation jurisdiction. I suggest you use the remaining days to begin voluntary removal procedures. I almost laughed. Removal procedures? Yes, she said like it was obvious. Of all non-sanctioned structures, vehicles, and utilities. I kept my cool. I don't know how. Maybe years of keeping a straight face in press rooms helped. Maybe I just hadn't fully processed what was happening yet. So I tried once more. Vivian, this land is legally mine. There's no record anywhere that gives your committee any claim over it. I'm offering you a chance to back off before this becomes very public very fast. She raised an eyebrow like I just challenged her to a bake-off. Well, she said sweetly, some people just don't like following rules. Then she turned and walked away. By Monday morning, there was a notice nailed directly to my front door. Not taped, nailed. Big, ugly iron nail hammered straight into the cedar frame. The paper looked like something printed from a bad legal template. The header read, Final Notice of Noncompliance. Bold red text claimed I owed $3,200 in community environmental penalties for unauthorized utilities and ecological damage. Ecological damage. This coming from the woman who had barbed wire strung through birch trees. I pulled the nail out, kept the paper, photographed it, stored it. Then came the inspection visits. It started with a man in a neon vest wandering around the edge of my property, snapping photos with his phone. No ID, no vehicle markings, just a clipboard and way too much interest in my tool shed. I confronted him. He claimed to be with the Environmental Conditions Review Board, a group I'd never heard of and later couldn't find any record of. Next day, A different guy walked around my solar panels, muttering something about off-grid misuse. He left a yellow slip under my windshield wiper like it was a parking ticket. Unauthorized energy harnessing method detected. Section 4.3. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. What did that even mean? Did they think I was summoning lightning out here? Still, I didn't explode. I documented every paper, every encounter. I kept a log with dates, times, faces. I started installing trail cameras, not just for animals now, but for people. My mountain retreat had become a surveillance zone. Peace was a memory. The final straw was the ATV. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I'd just gotten back from town, a bag of groceries in one hand, and there it was, a tow truck, rumbling up my driveway. Cables out, the driver already inching toward my four-wheeler like it belonged to him. I dropped the bag on the porch and marched over. Hey, that's my vehicle. What the hell do you think you're doing? The guy barely looked up. Order came through from the Alpine Committee. Said this vehicle is not street legal and violates community standards. It's not on a street. It's on my private land. He shrugged, clearly not paid to care. You want to talk to the lady who sent me? I got her on the line. He handed me a phone. Vivian's voice was as smug as ever. Mr. Hale, that ATV presents an unacceptable noise and safety risk. Per our noise regulation. Don't you dare send someone to remove my property without notice. There was notice, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. It was item 6 on your last citation. I never signed anything agreeing to your authority. Well, that's unfortunate, because we've already processed a removal with our contractor. I hung up. I told the tow driver if he touched my vehicle, I'd have him charged with theft. He backed off, reluctantly, but I could see he wasn't convinced I had the power to stop this. And that's when it hit me. That's what all this was. It wasn't about fines or citations or even land. It was a campaign, a strategy. Vivian was probing to see how far she could push, how much I'd take. She thought I was just another city slicker who bought a cabin and didn't want to ruffle feathers. She thought I didn't know how these games were played. She had no idea who I was. I watched the tow truck roll back down the mountain, empty. Then I went inside, poured myself a drink, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. If Vivian wanted to play bureaucracy, I could drown her in it. I wasn't filing complaints. I was opening investigations. I asked for a meeting, not because I had to, but because I wanted to give her one final chance to do the right thing before this thing spiraled into something she couldn't control. I figured maybe, just maybe, if I gave her an out, she'd take it. Back off. Remove the barbed wire, apologize for the misunderstanding, and disappear back into whatever petty committee she'd built. We met at the local lodge. Neutral ground. I booked a small conference room overlooking the lake, where the only thing louder than the loons outside was a tension in the air between us. Vivian arrived late, of course. Power move. She wore a white blazer this time, like she was dressing for court. Same clipboard, different attitude. She didn't even sit down at first, just stood in the doorway, chin raised like I was wasting her afternoon. Mr. Hale, she said curtly, I hope this isn't more of your complaints about the ATV incident. You've already been cited. I held up a hand. Let's skip the performance. I didn't call this meeting to argue about violations that aren't legal in the first place. She raised one eyebrow but stepped inside. I kept my voice calm, friendly even. I explained, again, that my land was not part of any recognized HOA jurisdiction. I showed her maps, tax records, official survey lines. I explained how her so-called Alpine Preservation Committee had no legal oversight on private land outside the zoning district she was referencing. She didn't even glance at the documents. Then take it up with the county, she said, smirking as she leaned back in her chair. If you're so sure you're exempt. I stared at her for a long moment. Then I leaned in, slowly, placing my hands flat on the table. My tone didn't change. My voice didn't rise. I am the county, I said softly, and the state. Her smirk froze. For the briefest second, something in her eyes flickered, like she wasn't sure if she'd misheard me or if I was bluffing. But she didn't ask. She didn't challenge it. She just sat there, blinking, her grip tightening around her clipboard. I leaned back. Now, Vivian, I'm giving you one last opportunity to remove the barbed wire, withdraw the fake citations, and dismantle whatever pretend committee you've put together. Quietly, peacefully, no paperwork, no hearings. You walk away, and I let this stay between us. She scoffed. Let this stay between us? Are you threatening me now? No, I said, still calm. I'm warning you. There's a difference. She crossed her arms, clearly trying to regain her footing. Well, I suppose we'll just have to let the courts figure that out, won't we? I stood up slowly. That's exactly what I hope you'd say. I didn't slam the door on my way out. I didn't make a scene. I just walked, deliberate, slow, leaving her behind in that little room with her blazer and her power trip and the faint realization that something wasn't quite adding up. That night, I sat on the porch of my cabin under a sky full of stars, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. But inside, my mind was already shifting. Vivian had chosen her path. She'd ignored every warning, dismissed every fact, pushed past every line. And now it wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. I opened my laptop, logged into a secured channel used for internal state communications, and drafted a memo. Not from Robert Hale, homeowner. From Robert Hale, elected official. It was short, to the point, and tagged with high urgency. Subject: unauthorized entity claiming municipal authority. Potential land fraud. Action: launch preliminary review. Request zoning history. Pull licensing records. I hit send. Then I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. It had begun. I hoped, for her sake, that she figured it out before the spotlight landed on her. But something told me she wouldn't. Vivian didn't strike me as the kind of person who backed down. She struck me as the kind of person who kept pushing until the floor disappeared beneath her feet. And I was already reaching for the lever. I thought she'd fold. Thought after our meeting, Vivian might finally realize she was playing a game way above her pay grade. I even gave her a full week. No calls, no paperwork. I waited, gave her space to walk away. But people like Vivian don't walk away. They double down. It started with a voicemail from the local fire marshal. Apparently, someone had filed a complaint about my chimney, said it was unstable, built without a permit, and posed a severe fire hazard to the surrounding wilderness. The report even cited risk of flammable material buildup and illegal modifications to state-controlled air vents. Air vents. My cabin didn't even have air vents. It was off-grid, sealed tight, and inspected 5 times over the years. Built by the book. Certified. Safe. When I arrived that Friday, the first thing I saw was a red tag plastered across my front door, bright neon orange, flapping in the wind like a warning flare. Condemned, do not occupy until cleared by fire authority. I stood there for a good 5 minutes, just staring at it, and then I saw what she'd really done. My solar array, 12 panels, mounted on poles I cemented into the ground myself, was gone. Ripped out, bolts sheared off. The inverter housing lay cracked open on the gravel, wires dangling like veins. There was no note, no signature, no official removal order. Just an empty mount and silence. She'd crossed a line, a big one, and she wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Inside, the cabin was freezing. No power, no heat. I lit a fire in the wood stove just to push the chill back, my hands trembling, not from cold, but rage. Then I saw the envelope on the floor. It had been slid under my door. Fancy letterhead. Gold embossed logo in the corner. Sundale Legal Group, LLC. Sounded impressive, until I Googled it. Didn't exist. The address was a UPS drop box. The phone number rang to a disconnected line. And the letter inside? A cease and desist, threatening legal action unless I immediately vacated the premises and ceased all hostile behavior toward the Alpine Preservation Committee. Hostile behavior? I hadn't even touched her damn wire. That was it. No more warnings. No more polite meetings. I took out my personal phone, the one I only use for certain calls. First, I called Melissa. She'd been my chief of staff for 5 years, sharp, connected, and loyal as hell. She picked up on the first ring. "Boss!" Vivian escalated. I said, "It's time." She didn't ask questions. Just said, "Understood," and hung up. Next, I made the call to the state attorney general's office. I didn't go through the front desk. I called a direct line. A man who owed me a favor after I helped his son out of a bad zoning snafu last year. "Need a quiet review opened," I said. "Possibly land fraud. Illegally formed HOA. Fake legal filings. Private property being seized without authority." There was a pause on the other end. "Is this about that barbed wire thing you mentioned?" "It's a lot more than barbed wire now." "Copy that," he said. "Send me everything. I'll flag it urgent." I spent the next 6 hours compiling it all. I pulled up every document I'd scanned, every photograph I'd taken, every citation, every notice left on my windshield. I included a photo of the solar array post removal. I even printed the fake legal letter, highlighting the UPS Dropbox address. Melissa, meanwhile, had started digging. By the next morning, she had found everything I needed. Vivian's Alpine Preservation Committee wasn't a registered HOA, not even close. She'd filed as a land trust through a shell LLC based out of Arizona. The trust didn't own land. It claimed to protect it, and it operated under the vague language of eco-stewardship, which gave her just enough wiggle room to sound official without actually having any power. But here's the real kicker. She'd use that same LLC to quietly seize influence over 3 adjacent properties, all under restoration agreements. Older residents, people who didn't know better. She convinced them to sign over limited access rights in exchange for preservation funding. Once she had her foot in the door, she rewrote the rules and began issuing fines. One man, a veteran who lived alone down the hill, had been fined $900 for excessive foliage. It wasn't about conservation. It was a hostile takeover, one property at a time. I wasn't going to be the next one. I drafted the request for an emergency hearing, attached everything Melissa had uncovered, filed it through both the state zoning board and the Secretary of State's office. Then I sent a formal notice to the county commissioner. I added a handwritten line at the bottom. "This isn't just unlawful. It's predatory, and I'm done playing nice. RH." The gloves were off. And Vivian? She was about to find out what it feels like when the people she thought were beneath her finally looked down. I wasn't invited to the meeting. Didn't need to be. I knew the place, the time, and the people. The flyer had been tacked up around town, with all the self-importance of a presidential debate. Alpine Preservation Committee, monthly open meeting, held in the modest community center, just off Route 12, next to a playground and a coffee shop that sold cookies big enough to be dinner. I showed up 15 minutes early, dressed in jeans, boots, and a plain jacket. Nothing flashy. I didn't want them to recognize me at first. Let them settle in. Let them talk. The room was about half full. Folding chairs. Paper name tags. A little table with a coffee urn and some stale muffins. The walls were lined with cheaply printed rule proposals and photos of tree-lined ridges, as if Vivian was single-handedly preserving the entire Appalachian ecosystem. She stood near the front, of course, clipboard in hand, hair styled sharp, eyes scanning the room like she was royalty overseeing a village council. She didn't see me. Not yet. The meeting began, and they dove right into it. Vivian rattled off fines that had been levied against members for things like improper fence materials and unauthorized flagpole installation. Some poor woman in the front row actually got scolded for planting lavender too close to the roadside boundary. I stayed quiet, took a seat in the back. They discussed new enforcement zones, which I knew meant more bogus citations. Vivian used phrases like eco-infringement and preservation enhancement compliance, which don't actually mean anything but sure sound threatening when said in that clipped, confident tone of hers. Then she opened the floor to public input. That was my cue. I stood up, calm, steady. A few heads turned. Vivian didn't recognize me at first, maybe because I wasn't wearing a suit or stepping out of a town car. "I've got a few concerns," I said, stepping forward. Vivian smiled with that same dismissive tilt of her head she'd used on me weeks ago. "I'm sorry. Are you a registered member of the Preservation Committee? No, I said, walking toward the front. But I am the legal property owner of the land you've been wire fencing and citing without jurisdiction. That caught a few more eyes. Whispers started. Sir, if you'd like to file a formal complaint. I held up my hand and kept walking. Reached the front, set a small leather case on the podium, clicked it open, and pulled out my ID. Not my driver's license. The other one. The room went still. Robert Hale, I said clearly, holding it up, State Mayor's Office. And as of yesterday morning, the governor's office has officially opened a fraud investigation into this committee. You could hear a pin drop. Vivian froze. Her jaw twitched. Her grip on the clipboard tightened like she wanted to throw it. I have a list, I continued, voice calm but firm, of criminal and civil violations currently under review. Let's start with land tampering. Then we'll move on to unauthorized barrier installation, impersonating a legal authority, misappropriation of land trust status, obstruction, coercion, and public intimidation. Now, just a minute, she tried. I raised a hand again, eyes locked on hers. You want to hear this next part. I reached into the case again and pulled out the cease and desist letter, the one from her fake law firm, the one with the UPS box address. Fake legal threats, I said, holding it up for everyone to see. Carry prison time. Vivian took a step back. I was advised by counsel. Then your counsel, I said, is about to be subpoenaed. Someone in the crowd gasped. I turned to face them all. I'm not here to grandstand. I'm here to tell every single homeowner who's been fined, threatened, or manipulated by this committee that help is coming. Investigators have already been assigned. Records have been pulled. And those red tags and barbed wire fences, they're coming down. Vivian's face had gone pale. She opened her mouth, probably to lie or deflect, maybe blame a clerical error or rogue staffer. But it didn't matter anymore. She'd been exposed. Not in a courtroom, not in a letter, but right here, in front of the very people she'd tried to control. I leaned in one last time, my voice low, so only she could hear it. You picked the wrong land, and the wrong man. Then I turned, walked straight down the center aisle and out the front doors. Behind me, the silence cracked into whispers, then outrage, then the sound of someone demanding a motion to dissolve the committee. The reckoning had begun, and I was just getting started. It took less than 2 days. 48 hours after I dropped my credentials on that community center podium, the entire mountain town lit up like a string of firecrackers. Word spread faster than gossip at a church picnic. And this time, I wasn't the one doing the talking. Local news crews were the first to show up. KHRT Channel 9, then a regional affiliate from the state capitol. They parked their vans outside the Alpine Preservation Committee office, which turned out to be nothing more than a rented trailer tucked behind a hardware store. Vivian didn't even bother answering questions. She locked the door, pulled the blinds, and pretended the world wasn't crashing down around her. But the world doesn't care about blinds when a story's this juicy. Her name hit headlines by noon. HOA President under investigation for fraud, threats, and illegal property seizure. The photos they used weren't flattering. One was from a meeting, her mouth open mid-sentence, finger in the air, looking exactly as smug and unlikable as I remembered. Turns out, this wasn't her first rodeo. A retired investigator from a nearby county recognized her name. Back in 2017, she'd been involved in another preservation committee. Different name, different town, same scheme. She created a phony HOA, issued citations, charged restoration fees, and then used those violations to pressure landowners into selling, all under the thin veil of community enhancement. The land she targeted just happened to be adjacent to a proposed highway expansion. Convenient. That time, the case fell apart due to lack of formal documentation. Basically, she'd been clever enough to leave no fingerprints. Until now, because this time, she picked the wrong man to mess with. This time, the land she tried to flip didn't belong to some retiree who just wanted to be left alone. It belonged to me. And the governor's office wasn't just filing paperwork. They were filing charges. By the third morning, her little HOA was dissolved, stripped of its status, scrubbed from the county website. All members released, fines rescinded, red tags voided, contractors she'd hired under review. At least one inspector admitted he'd been paid in cash. Then the accounts froze. The banking commissioner issued a freeze on all known accounts tied to her LLCs, 3 of them, in fact. Turns out she'd been moving money through shell corporations, bouncing fines from one entity to another to hide the trail. But Melissa's team found it. Every transfer, every invoice, every crooked dollar. And then came the footage. I was sitting on the porch that afternoon, coffee in hand, feet kicked up on the rail. The air was crisp, peaceful. The barbed wire had already been removed by county workers. An apology gesture I didn't even have to request. On my tablet, a live stream played from inside the county council building. Vivian was there, standing at the podium, trying to argue that the investigation was politically motivated, some kind of smear campaign. Her voice trembled, but she still had that practiced tone, the one used by people who have always gotten away with it, until the doors opened behind her. 2 plainclothes agents stepped in, walked straight to her, whispered something in her ear. She tried to pull back. You could see the exact moment she realized it wasn't a conversation. It was an arrest. They cuffed her on the spot. One of the cameras caught her expression perfectly. Shock, confusion, rage. She twisted around like she still couldn't believe it was happening, like she expected anyone, to stand up and defend her. But no one did. No one said a word. They just watched her get let out in silence. I took a slow sip of coffee and smiled. The civil charges I filed, trespassing, property damage, attempted extortion, were still pending. But the state's criminal case? That was already moving. Fraud, impersonating a municipal authority, racketeering. She wouldn't be weaseling out of this one with fake documents and a smirk. But the best part wasn't the arrest. It was what came next. A full audit. The Attorney General ordered it personally. Every single fine she issued, every bogus citation, every dollar collected from residents across the mountain, all of it was being reviewed. And if even one family was cheated out of their savings, if even one property was wrongfully taken, restitution would be mandatory. People who'd been afraid to speak up were now lining up to tell their stories. I watched clip after clip on my screen. An elderly couple who'd been fined $2,100 for a non-compliant porch swing. A single mom whose mailbox color was declared aesthetic pollution. A veteran who was told his service flag violated visual harmony codes. Now, they were getting their money back. And Vivian? She was going to spend a very long time explaining her codes to a judge. I leaned back, let the breeze move through the trees around me. The cabin felt quiet again, the way it used to, the way it always should have been. Vivian had tried to wall me out of my own land. Now the only walls she'd be seeing were made of concrete and steel. 6 months later, the cabin didn't just look different. It felt different. I'd rebuild it from the ground up, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I wanted the walls to carry new weight. I wanted every plank, every nail, every inch of cedar and steel to say one thing. This land is mine, and nobody takes it from me. The deck was twice the size now, wrapping around like an open arm to the forest. From up there, I could see the ridgeline clear as day, the same view Vivian once tried to fence off behind red tape and razor wire. Now, it was just green and sky and silence. Real silence. Not the kind you get when people are too scared to speak, but the kind you earn, the kind you defend. I'd added a rooftop antenna, taller, stronger, state grade. Not for show, not even for work, just because I could. I'd installed it without permits, just to remind myself I didn't need them here. This was the one place where I didn't answer to anyone. On the cabin's front post, just beside the porch steps, I mounted a plaque, hand-carved from salvage redwood, bold lettering, no gloss, private property, by order of the state. Every time I passed it, I smiled. Vivian had once threatened to condemn my cabin, called it a violation, told me to take it up with the county. Funny thing was, I was the county, and I didn't condemn it. I claimed it. That summer, I threw a barbecue. No permits, no noise curfew, no approval forms or environmental assessments. I didn't even post about it until the morning of. Just a few calls of friends, neighbors, the folks who'd stood by me when this mess started. They came in droves. Grills sizzled from noon to midnight. Kids ran barefoot through the grass. There was laughter, music, and beer. Real country music, too, not the filtered radio stuff. The kind that shakes the porch floorboards and rattles the ice in your glass. Somebody brought fireworks. I didn't stop them. Late in the evening, a young reporter from a local station pulled me aside. She'd been covering the aftermath, Vivian's trial, the restitution payouts, the ripple effect in other counties where similar fake HOAs had suddenly gone quiet. She asked, if you could say one thing to other HOA boards who might try something like this, what would it be? I looked at the lights strung across my porch, the empty beer bottles stacked like trophies near the grill, the kids roasting marshmallows over the fire pit. Then I looked her square in the eyes and said, know your boundaries, or I'll show you mine. She blinked, then scribbled it down like it was a quote for the ages. Maybe it was. I didn't say anything else. Didn't need to. By midnight, most people had gone home. A few friends stayed behind to help clean up, but I told them not to bother. I liked the quiet mess. It was the kind of mess that meant something had happened. Something worth remembering. I sat on the porch long after the music faded, watching the moonlight stretch across the trees. Beside the fire pit sat a strange little sculpture. Twisted, metallic, almost beautiful in a brutal kind of way. It used to be barbed wire. I'd had it melted down, reshaped into garden art. Bent loops, jagged spirals, the occasional rusted tip pointing toward the sky. I didn't hide it. I displayed it, right where the boundary used to be. Some people asked why I kept it. Why not just throw it away? Because you don't erase battles. You remember them. You carry them. You let them remind you that peace isn't the absence of trouble. It's what you build after trouble fails to take you down. The cabin was mine. Still was. Always would be. And as long as I drew breath, no committee, no fake law, no clipboard-wielding fraud was ever going to take that away again.